The Family Caregiver Alliance defines a caregiver as an unpaid individual, a spouse, a partner, a family member, a neighbor, or a friend involved in assisting others with activities of daily living such as dressing, bathing, grooming, or other medical tasks. Services provided by family caregivers represent 80% of all home care services. A recent study by the National Alliance for Caregiving and AARP found that 44.4 million Americans aged 18 or older are providing unpaid care to a loved one. If we had to pay for this care, it would cost an estimated $257 billion per year. Almost 60% of all caregivers either work or have worked while providing care. 62% have had to make adjustments to their work-life balance, either reporting to work late or giving up work entirely. 89% of caregivers are helping relatives. So what does caregiving mean to you? Is it answering the cries of a sick child at night? Is it helping your husband get out of bed after suffering a recent stroke? Maybe it's learning how to operate mom's new wheelchair, or hiding the keys from dad so we will not try to back out of the garage this month. Or is it the long sleepless nights, or the constant worry about moving mom into assisted living facility, or navigating Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security benefits? Is it learning how to communicate with the doctors or the nurses, or pondering our finances, wondering how to make our financial dollars stretch? Or perhaps it's the joy we feel when our loved ones say thank you, or I feel good today, or the simple gesture of a friend that says, can I lend a hand? Caregiving reminds me of the Frankie Beverly and Mays song, joy and pain, sunshine and rain. Caregiving isn't an easy job, and it has its ups and its downs. It's not for the faint at heart, but in the end, there are many rewards, and we thank you. We thank you for your time, we thank you for your commitment, we thank you for your love.
My loved one is my mom, Joan Ellsbury, and she is a 77-year-old woman who was born and raised in England, in Grimsby, England, and she married my dad when he was in the service and came here. A few years ago, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's-related dementia. I never thought that my mom would be a victim of Alzheimer's. I have a great daughter to help me, friends that help me. We just try to, I guess, come together and make her as happy and comfortable as we can. So.
Who is that? That's a cousin's wife.
Who is that?
Susie.
Okay, yeah, not me. Does Margaret have? Some of the challenges that I face as a caregiver include being able to remain patient with my mom throughout this illness. My mom does have moments where she's lucid and clear with her Alzheimer's-related dementia, and it's really strange because my mom can still to this day answer virtually every question on Jeopardy. But she can, in the mornings, ask me 20 times before I leave in the morning what time it is, what day it is it cold outside? My mother really has no concept of feeling full. So my mother could literally eat 24 hours a day. And what that means for us is that we actually have to keep a lock on our refrigerator so that my mother cannot go into the refrigerator all day long and eat, because that's what she would do. She was doing that. With my mother's illness, my schedule is pretty much set. I work full-time as a mortician in a funeral home, and that entails me embalming pretty much on a daily basis, and sometimes meeting with families and making arrangements and going out on funeral services. I'm also a third-year law student. My daughter and I had pretty much tag team my mother's care. So my daughter's also a graduate student. She teaches as a student teacher full-time, and she attends graduate classes full-time. We have made the commitment in taking care of my mother to alternate schedules, whereas one is always around or available to help to take care of my mother.
I think that caregiving has impacted my relationship with both my grandmother and my mother in a positive way. We collaborate and do mostly everything that we can to make sure that my grandmother is taken care of and that she's safe, and that all of her different medical issues are handled. I'm not saying that it is always easy, because oftentimes when I am frustrated with my grandmother, my mother will step in and we flip roles. If she becomes frustrated, I will step in and kind of try to calm things down, because, you know, my grandmother may be upset. It's a natural emotion to be angry if you don't really understand what's going on, or the person themselves who has Alzheimer's is frustrated.
As a caregiver and a daughter, my daughter and I have actually made my daughter POA, power of attorney over my mother's legal and financial affairs. And my daughter has really stepped up to the plate, and my mother and my daughter have this agreement really to make my daughter the POA, I think, was best, because my mother and my daughter have a very special relationship. My mother has always called my daughter her best friend, and so I kind of thought it was almost only natural to ask my daughter if she would take on the role of power of attorney, and she handles the role excellently. Oh, look at it. Who was that?
That's you.
Oh, where was that picture taken?
That picture was taken.
If someone finds themselves thrust into the role of being a caregiver, the first thing I would tell them to do is to breathe, to sit back, to kind of take in the entire situation and realize that it's not life-ending. It's life-changing, but it's not life-ending. Life goes on. We've come to realize that this is something that we can manage and we can live with, and we're doing it. And so, you know, hopefully other people look at us and say, if they're doing it, know this. If we're doing it, you can do it. We're like any other family. We're no different from any other family.
We provide health care for our parents, her mom and my dad. My dad's condition is diabetes and high blood pressure. He is in a unassisted living seniors facility and managing pretty well.
My mother, her diagnosis is dementia. She's actually otherwise physically well. She lives in a semi-assisted living senior building. She lives in her own apartment, basically does all the normal activities of daily living for herself, except she doesn't really cook. So they have meal preparation for dinner provided for everybody that lives there.
We do work. I'm a musician and producer. My wife is a physician and a medical director. My schedule is very flexible, so it allows me the opportunity to go and check on my dad and my mother-in-law for doctor's appointments or to run errands.
My job, fortunately, even though it's 9 to 5, 9 to 6, I do have some flexibility built in my day such that we can run errands, take our parents to wherever they need to go. I would like to say that I'm married to a wonderful man. because, you know, one of the challenges that I have is if my mom is having a rough day, then sometimes I internalize that and I'll bring that home. And he's understanding. He's always been very supportive. At one point, my mom actually lived with us, and he's been welcoming, and they have a great relationship. And so I feel myself fortunate in that I have a mate who understands the challenges, because he's had those challenges, and he hasn't really mentioned yet, but his mom has passed away, but he was also a caretaker for his mom, so he kind of understands already the challenges that I go through, and therefore has been very supportive and embracing of my mom as well.
I think most of our challenges come in, you know, whether our parents are going to be well. How well are they going to be? What's the expectation? What's your level of just health-wise dealing with your parents? I mean, nobody wants to see a parent suffer at all. I mean, nobody wants to see your parents suffer. And I think that's a big challenge.
I'd say two additional challenges. One is if you have brothers and sisters, making sure that, you know, if you're the primary caregiver, that they're kept in the loop, that they understand everything that's going on. And if there are decisions that you have to make as a family, making sure that, you know, that communication and that dialogue is there. Planning ahead financially and planning ahead legally, especially, those are some of the two big decisions that as families you have to talk about. In certain relationships, there's a dynamic where, you know, the parent is still the parent and the child is still the child, and oftentimes there's a you really as the child, now being the caregiver, have to walk that fine line between making sure that, you know, your parent retains the autonomy and the respect that they're due, where at the same time, you know that there are certain things that need to be done, and they may or may not be accepting of those things. You know, my mom is a PhD in philosophy and master's in music, well-traveled around the world, and then to see how she has changed is really required me to, you know, like I said, be able to put it in context and be able to draw from some strength beyond my own.
The satisfaction we get from being caregivers is the satisfaction that you get an opportunity and a chance to really look after your family and really take care of people who have taken care of you for any number of years. And they never stop in their mind taking care of you. Even though the tide turns and you have to take care of them, they never stop taking care of you.
I would say the advice that I would give somebody who's thrust into the role of a caregiver, number one is to first understand yourself and your own limitations. I'd say one thing that caregiving has taught me is, you know, I was an emergency medicine doctor, so I'm used to things going really fast. And one thing that I had to take on my own self-inventory was my degree of patience. And just in most older people, life just works at a slower pace. And so, you know, being in tune with what their needs are and the pace at which they go, and level setting yourself to that pace, I think is key. I think the next thing to do is inventory what their needs are and find the appropriate resources and in the community to really try to take care of that. And then of the varying needs, whether it be financial, legal, health-wise, transportation, nutrition, food, there are solutions for all of those. And then thirdly, like I said before, you know, making sure that that communication piece is there within your family so that you're talking about the issues and facing them head on, and, you know, not trying to put them off because, you know, tomorrow's not promised. And the best thing to do is when you have an issue to face it head on and communicate as best you can with your family.
I cared for my mother and my sister, and really their acute illness was basically in the same time frame. My sister's illness was through a tremendous stroke. She had a stroke which ended up placing her in diagnosis of being semi-vegetative. One day she was vibrant and she was working. We all worked together in a nonprofit organization. And then suddenly the stroke that she had affected the brain stem. And as a result of that, all of who she was basically taken away in a very short time frame. She couldn't speak. She had no control of her body. She could not open her eyes because the brain stem controls those motions. My mother, on the other hand, had been sick off and on for several years, but still very vibrant, a very witty person, a very lively person. So that was quite devastating because the personalities and the presence, it was all missed, along with the sickness. My mother and my sister, plus I had another sister, were all ministers, and they all lived in the same home. And that too was something that was difficult. My sister, of course, had to go into long-term care, into skilled nursing. I didn't live with them, and I had not lived with them for many years. I had 3 children who were all adult children, but I also had several grandchildren from my adult married children. And I lived not far from them, but I lived alone. We operated a nonprofit, which is still operating, called Terrific Incorporated. And it is an acronym as long as Temporary Emergency Residential Resource Institute for Families in Crisis. But it does what it says, and it's a 36-year-old organization. The interesting thing about the organization, and within the context of caring for family, is that the organization itself provides care for people who are in unfortunate situations. The sister who was the president of the nonprofit would stay home and do most of the day-to-day. She would be there, and I would go on and continue doing the work in the organization. And that was an agreement that we came to because it was a necessity, as well as was something that seemed to work best for all involved. The daily routine, sometimes it was predictable, and many times, more often than not, it was unpredictable. Because there were times when there might be a call from the nursing home to come immediately, or there may be a call from the nursing home to say that the ambulance is taking your sister to Sibley Hospital and someone needs to get there quickly. And that would mean that regardless to what had been planned for work, what I would do is go to the hospital because that was something that could not wait. Caregiver doesn't know from day to day or from moment to moment what he or she might encounter for that day. And if it were not for the grace and the strength and the peace of God, I've said many times, if it were not for that, it would be very hard to be able to continue to do what is necessary, what is required. My mother died in June of 2011, and my sister died 6 months and short of 2 days of my mother's death. Or my sister was buried 6 months short of 2 days of my mother's death. Needless to say, that was devastating. In sickness, there should also be dignity. And in sickness, one should also be able to maintain or have maintained those things that are important to them. Both of them were very prayerful people, and I was so grateful to God that the same God that they trusted in for their life and their strength, that I did too. And so in their presence, I knew how to give to them what I would want them to give to me. And it meant a lot. As I look back and both of them are gone, it means so much to me that I was blessed to participate in providing that care. There's such a satisfaction and such a peace that comes to me to say, oh, I thank you, God, that you were kind enough to let me do what I could do. I wish I could have done it better, but those are people I love. And if I had to do again, I'd do it, and I would do it because I love them.
My loved one is Jasper Lawhon, who's my husband. He has cancer, has had it for over a year. When he first was diagnosed, he was able to do a lot for himself. But then as it progressed, he had to go into chemotherapy. And that was when I had to take over as a caregiver, totally being responsible for him. I tell a lot of people that it's like a mother with a child, but it's an adult child. So in the beginning, he just couldn't understand all of a sudden that he was not able to be totally in charge. It was very, very hard for him. And at times it is still hard for him. It has gotten better because I think he thought that I would not be able to handle it. But now that he sees that I can handle it, he got better with it. First thing I do, get up in the morning and I pray and I ask God to give me the strength, the knowledge, and the wisdom, the understanding to do whatever it is that I have to do that today, to not only take care of him, but to take care of myself. Sometimes he'll get up at 9 o'clock. I'll go up and he says, no, let me sleep a little longer. That's when we do not have doctor's appointment. We have doctor's appointment, we have to get up early. Therefore, I am trying to put certain things in order, make sure that his medication is out, make sure that his clean clothes are out, all of the things that he needs for his personal grooming is laid out in the bathroom for him, because he still wants to do that himself. But I have to just lay it out for him and then kind of stand back on the side to make sure he can do it, because he's such a proud man. Going to the doctor, particularly when he was going through chemotherapy, getting blood transfusions, having to sit there, I would never leave the room. I was always in the room with him. But to see him going through what he was going through, and then you say, oh God, is this going to help? And then in the end, when they said, this is all we can do. That's when the greatest challenge of all comes in. They suggested hospice, And we both denied it at that time. And then we went back to the doctor, and the doctor said, Mr. Lawhon, how do you feel about hospice? Before she got it out of her mouth, he said, I want hospice because my wife can no longer do it by herself. That was such a relief for me because I didn't want to make the decision. Hospice is good, but I've got to get used to someone else coming in and doing what I thought that I could do. So it's harder on me getting adjusted because I feel like no one is going to take care of my Jasper like I take care of him. Yes, they are qualified, but I have to make sure that they are doing what I was doing. And we have everything outlined in the will as to how we want everything done, right on down to our burials. And that's for both of us. Matter of fact, we both have wrote our own, I call it our bio, because that's the way he labeled it, bio. Starting the Caregivers Ministry at my church, which is the People's Community Baptist Church, is something that I think is one of the greatest ministries that a church should have. The main goal was to bring together those who are caring for their loved ones, to come together, to be able to share with one another what they were going through, get resources of how you can get help in going through this, pray with each other, being able to just let go and release. So that's what the Caregivers Ministry at our church is doing. Once a month we come together, and that's what we do. And it is growing leaps and bounds. My advice to someone who's becoming a caregiver is to understand that you're going to be taking on the responsibility of another individual, and also that you still have your responsibility. Prepare yourself to make plans, to do proper scheduling, and to seek resources and support. You can't do it alone.